Young Turks now has audio, the TYT Audio Network, podcasts of some of your favorite shows and new shows, including one with Nina Turner, former Ohio State Senator. She's going to do We the People with Nina Turner, talking about equality and justice and seeing that through the eyes of regular Americans who are affected by politics and policy. Everybody check it out at tyt.com/audio.
Following the G7 summit in Canada, Trump decided that he was no longer willing to sign on to agreements or negotiations or deals with our allies, which is a little disastrous. The US earlier pulled out of a previously agreed G7 negotiation after Trudeau vowed to, quote, move forward with retaliatory measures in response to US steel and aluminum tariffs. Now, he said this during a press conference, and any leader would have this response to the United States increasing tariffs or slapping on new tariffs on products that are being exported to the United States. Now, I want you to watch Trudeau's press conference, and then I'll give you the childish, juvenile reaction from our president.
I highlighted directly to the president that Canadians did not take it lightly, that the United States has moved forward with significant tariffs on our steel and aluminum industry, particularly did not take lightly the fact that it's based on a national security reason, that for Canadians who either themselves or whose parents or community members have stood shoulder to shoulder with American soldiers in far-off lands and conflicts from the First World War onwards, that it's kind of insulting.
So all he said there was, this is not okay, it's kind of insulting. And that set Trump off. He went on a Twitter storm. I don't even want to get into every tweet that he put out there because it was full of lies. He made it seem as though Canada does nothing but take advantage of us, which is not the case. Again, Canada is our largest trading partner. We do a lot of business with them, and starting a trade war with them is going to hurt manufacturers here in the United States and farmers here in the United States. But just to give you an example of one of Trump's tweets, he said the United States will not allow other countries to impose massive tariffs and trade barriers on its farmers, workers, and companies. But that's what you're doing. You started it. You started this. And Trudeau is doing what anyone else would do. He's responding with retaliatory measures, which everyone had warned Trump about. Now, Trump has surrounded himself with yes men. And among those yes men is Peter Navarro. And Peter Navarro did not enjoy that press conference and hit back at Trudeau. So did Larry Kudlow. Larry Kudlow is one of Trump's advisors. And I want to actually go to his video first. He believes that Trudeau has stabbed the United States in the back.
But what did he say that was so offensive? President Trump accused him of lying.
Well, he holds a press conference and he said the U.S. is insulting. He said that Canada has to stand up for itself. He says that we are the problem with tariffs. What the non-factual part of this was they have enormous tariffs. I mean, they have tariffs on certain dairy and food products of a 295%. He was polarizing. You know, here's the thing. I mean, he really kind of stabbed us in the back. He really actually, you know what? He did a great disservice to the whole G7. He betrayed.
Trudeau did.
Yes, he did.
Because Trudeau's the one who started this whole trade war. He's the one who started with random tariffs out of nowhere. Well, look, Larry Kudlow wasn't the only one. Peter Navarro, who is a trade advisor in the Trump administration, also hit back at Trudeau and very aggressively. Take a look.
There's a special place in hell for any foreign leader that engages in bad faith diplomacy with President Donald J. Trump and then tries to stab him in the back on the way out the door. And that's what bad faith Justin Trudeau did with that stunt press conference. That's what weak, dishonest Justin Trudeau did. And that comes right from Air Force One.
There's a special place in hell. All Trudeau said was that it was insulting. And it is insulting when you, out of nowhere, decide you're going to punish your allies and destroy your relationship with them.
Trudeau's comments were so Canadian. They were so polite. Yeah. They were so, there was no aggressive aspect to it. Remember, I'll remind you, he's got a country that he's leading also.
Right.
What is he supposed to do? Stand there when asked the question, what are you going to do now that Americans are going to be charging more for Canadian products and there are going to be tariffs imposed? What is he supposed to say? Go, well, Donald J. Trump is a great man and, I'm sure, let's hope it all works out. No, he's going to say, we're very disappointed. We've stood with the United States of America. This can't stand if they are going to, and we didn't hear this clip, but he went on to say, if they're going to do this, we regret, he used the word regret, that we are going to have to impose tariffs on American products. I thought, wow, you can't really get much more polite than that in the face of what is clearly an aggressive economic tactic.
I mean, retaliatory has a very clear definition. There's that. And then also, I mean, he said, you kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, basically, essentially, and they've kicked the man's future soul out of heaven. But it's like, this is bizarre.
That is a weakness in the Trump administration. This is Game of Thrones, right? If you are polite, if you are professional, if you show any, I don't know, humanity in your response, they will attack, and that's exactly what happened here, right?
Yeah, Trump called him weak.
There's a special place in hell for him. Exactly. Trump referred to him as weak and meek. And so the professionalism and the leadership that you saw from Trudeau there is something that, again, the Trump administration sees as a weakness to capitalize on. And by the way, Trudeau has not responded to Navarro, but he went even further in his interview with Fox News. I want to show you the second video. Take a look.
To my friends in Canada, that was one of the worst political miscalculations of a Canadian leader in modern Canadian history. All Justin Trudeau had to do was take the win. President Trump did the courtesy to Justin Trudeau to travel up to Quebec for that summit. He had other things, bigger things on his plate in Singapore, where you are now, Chris. He did him a favor, and he was even willing to sign that socialist communique. And what did Trudeau do as soon as the plane took off from Canadian airspace? Trudeau stuck our president in the back. That will not stand.
That was completely full of lies. Trump pulled out of that communique. Let's be absolutely clear about that. Also, you want to talk about political miscalculations? I would say a political miscalculation is slapping tariffs on aluminum and steel that will negatively impact manufacturers here in the United States. Like, that is a political miscalculation. Unfortunately, people don't, and when I say people, I specifically mean his base, they don't realize it yet. Some of the farmers do, interestingly enough, because already these tariffs that other countries have slapped on US products are directly impacting the farmers. But I mean, come on, it's just lie after lie. And look, it's terrifying. For me, it's terrifying to see these Trump cronies just support anything and everything he does and act as if he's some sort of king that they could never criticize and they can never look at the situation objectively.
I think they do want that image of him as a king. Certainly he wants it. And I chuckle because it's so absurd. I mean, when Navarro says, Trudeau should have just, it was so easy for him. He should have just taken the win. Taken the win? Where's the win?
It was already not going to be a thing. And how do you sit there and say the president had better things to do than this little G7 summit? Like, essentially,
like what? Tweet?
Yeah.
What? And by the way,
this is a big deal.
He mentioned the summit with Kim Jong-un in Singapore, but Trump himself said repeatedly, after being asked by reporters, that he's not preparing for this meeting with Kim Jong-un because it's all about attitude. And that, he can just sense, it's what he does. It's his thing. He can just sense whether or not someone's being serious about making a deal. You're not preparing for anything. You're not doing anything important. You spend all your time on Twitter and you spend all your time watching Fox News. Like, it's so incredible. It is insulting, to say the least, to the allies that have worked with us for a very long time and have stood by us in tragic times, including 9/11.
Yeah, this also is a situation where I think Donald Trump doesn't want to share the stage and the limelight with 6 other leaders, all of whom don't like him right now, or are certainly not crazy about his policies. It might even go to personal animus, but they definitely don't like what's going on in the U.S. vis-a-vis what this president's doing. So he arrived late. He even arrived late. He arrived late for the whole thing. Then he arrived late for the first session. It was already underway. So everybody's talking, and then Donald Trump shows up. And then he left early, as Anna
Way
said.
early.
Yeah, way early. So I think the whole situation, again, he had to share the spotlight, and he was with a bunch of people who are not crazy about him.
It's so sad that we're in this space with the president where these are even feasible arguments when he's against something that he's not getting the attention, that we can say that about the leader of our country, and it sounds plausible. Do you know what I mean? That's nuts.
Yeah,
right?
it's not what you expect in a leader. You expect, look, probably all these leaders have healthy egos, but we have a guy who is just completely self-absorbed. He's one-dimensionally obsessed with himself, and he's full of vanity and all those other things that are superficial and that only relate to his vision of everything.
Yeah, I mean, you can be full of it, I don't know if it should drive you.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.